Hey everyone, so today we will be discussing factors that affect the supply of a good or service. So in the economy, it is crucial to understand the supply concepts so that we can also understand the behavior of sellers. Firstly, let's introduce what it means to supply a good or service in the market. So a good or service is an object or action that firms produce and sell to households in exchange for revenue. Supply is the amount of a good or service that firms produce and sell to households at any given price, which is also called the quantity supplied. The relationship between the quantity supplied and the price of a good or service can be represented by a supply schedule or on a supply curve. Now that we understand supply, we can now discuss factors and examples that affect the supply of a good or service. There are 5 factors that affect the supply chain: change in production cost, technology, amount of suppliers, expectation of future prices, and government policies. To help better understand these factors, I'll be using a real life example of solar panels. Let's begin with the change in production cost. If the price of glass, which is a key material needed to produce solar panels, increased, the firm selling the solar panels would either need to spend more to produce the same amount of solar panels or spend the same amount and produce less. If the firm spent the same amount on the glass, the supply of solar panels would decrease. Another factor which affects the supply of a good or service is technology. Let's just say that there is a technological advancement in solar panels, where they could capture sunlight on both sides. This would lead to an increase in supply because the firm that is producing the solar panels could do so more efficiently. Also, using the example of solar panels, we can see that if the amount of sellers increase, the supply of goods or services will also increase. Let's just say there are 3 suppliers of glass as opposed to 1. This would mean that there would be more materials for the producers of solar panels to use. The supply curve can also be shifted by an expectation of future prices and government policies. These two could affect the supply of solar panels by creating roadblocks in production. Now you're probably wondering about shifts and movements along the supply curve. An increase in supply would shift a supply curve right, while a decrease in supply would shift it left. For a movement along the supply curve, an increase in price of a good or service means that sellers want to sell more of that product, which leads to an upward movement along the curve. And the same idea applies when there is a decrease in price because sellers would want to sell less, which would lead to a downward movement along the curve. Just to recap, the 5 factors that affect the supply chain are a change in production cost, technology, amount of suppliers, expectation of future prices, and government policies. An increase in supply would shift a supply curve right, while a decrease would shift it left. And finally, an increase in the price of a good leads to an upward movement along the supply curve, while a decrease in price leads to a downward movement. Thank you.